Maintaining a healthy lifestyle is not just about our physical health. We need to consider our emotional health as well. Emotional health issues don't discriminate. They can affect anyone, at any time, and for any reason.
Basically, I struggled significantly with anger problems. I found myself always blaming other people, never taking responsibility for anything, no matter if it's behaviors, not doing my homework, not showing up to class, whatever it may be. It was always someone else's fault and not necessarily my own. Obviously, it got me into a lot of trouble, lots of arguments verbally, lots of physical incidents and things like that throughout school. And so eventually it ended up kind of slowly dying down in regards to like the amount of episodes and how often it happened and things like that. So that was all because of me reaching out to a social worker and him being willing to help me out. It was pretty much anything. It could be someone like leaving a piece of paper on my desk. It could be someone like saying something inappropriate about me or something that I didn't necessarily like. It could be me not feeling like I was treated fairly. Everything. I was just an emotional wreck, and it led me to a lot of problems, both academic as well as behavioral issues. So yeah, it was pretty significant to the point where I've been unfortunately suspended, brought up for expulsion. Detention was pretty much my last name, as well as Saturday school. So it definitely put kind of a crutch on my academic career, which luckily I was able to turn around and kind of go down the right path at some point.
Okay, so when I was in, I think it was the summer of before 8th grade, I woke up early one morning to go take my sister to work, and I don't know, out of nowhere, I just got the overwhelming fear of like dying. And from then on, day after day after day, the only thought that I could think of was, I'm scared to die, I'm scared to die, I'm scared to die. And it was worse at night because I felt that like in the morning I wasn't gonna wake up. And so it was overwhelming me so much that I couldn't focus on my schoolwork, and I was always a straight A student. So it was like really hard to focus and concentrate, and it got to a point where I was crying every single night, and I finally decided to tell my parents about it. I thought they were gonna be like mad at me for being scared to die. But they weren't, and they said, you should probably talk to a counselor about it because we can't help you enough. So I decided to then say yes, and I went to a counselor, and she started helping me out. But then I started freshman year, and during freshman year, I had a very tough event happen to me, and I saw something that I didn't want to see. And after that happened, I fell into major depression, and I was always anxious. I was super down, and I would cry like almost every day. And because of that, then I developed an eating disorder that got worse because I was so depressed. And I ended up losing a lot of friends because they didn't want to be around me because I was down. But I realized like it's not my fault, so I didn't want to feel bad about it. And that's what I've been going through.
So it was the first week of my freshman year of college when I got a phone call that my older brother Eric had died by suicide. And it was somewhat unexpected. His girlfriend had broken up with him a week prior, and I knew he was upset. He had confided in me that he was having trouble sleeping, trouble eating. I just didn't recognize it at the time for severe depression and potential suicidal thoughts. I know that now, looking back on it, but not something that in the moment I really knew. I knew he was upset, but I didn't realize the extent of it. And then it was so the first year after Eric died, kind of was just numb feeling. And then it was really a year after that I started to experience really severe depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts as well. Kept it to myself for quite a while, and then eventually confided in my parents because no one really knew how severe it was.
Probably starting in 7th grade, I wasn't able to deal emotionally with past trauma that I dealt with when I was younger. So at about 7th, 8th grade, it got hard to relive the moments and all that. So I'd say I kind of brushed it off for a few years, and then freshman year, it really hit me hard with coming into high school, losing a lot of my friends from middle school, and just being really alone. So I really started to battle depression. I was at the beginning of freshman year, and throughout freshman year, I kind of was like, oh, I'm fine. Until probably the end of freshman year, it just was too hard, and I was not happy at all with anything. And I really didn't deal with it in the most positive ways. I started self-harming a lot, and I wouldn't talk in class anymore, and I love talking in class. I love school, and I just didn't have that passion anymore. And I would say probably the last 2-3 weeks of freshman year was just, I couldn't do it anymore. And at one point, I think I attempted suicide, and I failed, which was a good thing. And I went through the summer trying to get back on my feet, trying to get everything back together. It took me a while to get back to to finish the school year. It took me a long time to finish freshman year. Then sophomore year, I was determined to make it a good year. Like, there's nothing that's gonna stop me. It was gonna be a good year. And that didn't turn out in my favor. I'd say I had volleyball season beginning of the sophomore year. I got hit in the head with a concussion. I got a concussion. And then that was just like, oh man. So I was out of school a lot, and I fell behind. And then I got a worse concussion, and it was just like a monopoly effect, and it all kind of went downhill. Sophomore year, I just really struggled with being happy. I just hated who I was. I hated my life and all. And so I tried to commit suicide again, and I ended up not doing it in a really bad way, and it really jeopardized my health. So I was out of school probably for two weeks or so. So I was really behind. And when I came back, I still had the concussion and everything, so it was still hard to catch back up. And it was just like battle after battle after battle, and I never could seem to just stop and catch my breath. I'd say the end of sophomore year, I still was struggling. Still just pushing through, but struggling a lot. The end of school year, my grades were super bad. I normally am a pretty good student, but they were just so bad. I remember the last day of school, I had a meeting with one of my therapists, and she was like, oh, how are you? And I was like, I'm fine. And I really did feel like I was fine, but was not. I was just in a really low place, but I was so content with being low at that point that it just didn't matter to me. And just life didn't matter at all. And she realized that I was really close to failing my chemistry class. And when I finally found out that I did fail the class, she was hesitant to send me home. So I went to the hospital, and I couldn't have asked for a better way to start the summer. But it really did help me. I learned a lot from that visit. I just got on a new medication that helped me a lot, And since then, I've been really good, in my opinion. I've back to being Shamira, who I've wanted to be for a long time. So it was a long time coming, but I'm back to a good, stable place.
So between the summer of 2008 till January of 2010, my life just got inundated with several emotional stresses. So the first occurred when, at that time in 2008, I was pregnant with my second daughter, and I went to an exam, and I got really bad news from that doctor, and he said, I'm seeing markers for all these problems with pregnancy, and more than likely the pregnancy will not progress. And so I said, okay, and I was like 19 weeks pregnant at this time, and I'm like, doctors can be wrong, whatever, you know. And he said, come back in 2 weeks. And I said, okay. And I said to my husband, I'm not going back to him. I want to go to a different doctor. And I did. I went to a different doctor, different specialist, a different hospital. And that particular doctor told me definitely was going to lose the baby, and that it was serendipitous to nature, and that I could have healthy pregnancies in the future. So obviously that was very devastating news. But the pregnancy progressed, like she's here, you know. So I started having like trust issues with doctors and everything like that. And so, you know, she got here, and she got here early, so she was only 2 pounds, 5 ounces, and she didn't have any chromosal abnormalities like they thought that she would have. But she was in the NICU for 6.5 weeks, and then for like a good year, of course, I was checking her development and concerned and worried. And I could feel myself during that time just kind of get on, I call it like the worry treadmill. Like I just always was like stuck worrying about something because, you know, I felt like something special was like taken away from me. And then I was constantly worried for her that something was really gonna be wrong, and, you know, how could 2 doctors be so wrong, and, you know, just kind of questioning things. But then also during that time, my father got incredibly sick. So I was dealing with that emotional stress of that, and then dealing with emotional stress of my mom having a hard time coping with the news of my own father's health. And I'm a person that is sensitive. Like, I'm a person that feels other people's feelings. You know, that's what makes me like a good English teacher. You know, that's what makes me a good teacher. And so work stress, like I'm your girl. Like, you can give me like 3,000 things and I'll get it done. But when all those emotional stresses were piling up on me, and then every person hearing the story of my pregnancy, every professional was like, you're gonna have to look out for postpartum depression and things like that, you know? So then it was in my head. So I just started feeling anxiety, right? Like just kind of feeling it. And I talked to some of my friends about it, and they were like, Mary, you're strong. You always persevere through, you're fine, you know? And I'm like, but I'm not, you know? I just wanted them to like acknowledge my pain. And more time went by, and I didn't talk to anybody then. And I was having super irrational thoughts then. Like, what if this? What if I do this wrong? And what if I screw up here? And and I was never like that before. I would like leave my house, and what if I didn't close the garage door? What if and that wasn't me. But it's because I wasn't sleeping, you know, like that well. Like when you start to have that anxiety, it just builds up. So it got to the point where things took a turn again with my father. And then again, I'm raising 2 young children at this time. I'm not sleeping well. We have winter break, and then my mom has a health issue. And so I drive like in a snowstorm, you know, so it's just like all these life things that I have no control over. And that's when anxiety decides to show up, right? It's like, you know, I have to control something, you know, because I can't control anything else. So you start overthinking like how you can control those things. So I come back from winter break, and I walk in, I believe it's store 7, and I did not feel like I had a break at all. And I remember walking past the display case and seeing my reflection in it. I didn't look good, I didn't feel good, and here I had to start like second semester with new students. And I got to my classroom, and I had a hard time breathing. Like, panic started to come in, and then like it was pretty much the whole day where I was just like, my breathing was off. And then I felt like, how can I teach these kids? I'm not like being myself and all this. And talked to a couple colleagues, oh, Mary, you're fine. Mary, you're always strong, you know? And I'm like, no, something's wrong.
Well, I will say that I've probably had lots of little stories along my life
that have been times where things are challenging for me, and there are times when things are still challenging. The most recent one was when after I had my 2 oldest children, and then I had Madeline, and then I had 2 back-to-back miscarriages. The first one was at 6 weeks, and then the second one was at 17 weeks. And I was at the hospital to pick up the envelope with the gender in it. So in like 5 days, we were gonna do a gender reveal party, and we found out the baby had just died. And it was awful. And your hormones just go everywhere. And so as sad as I was to lose this baby I never met, my hormones felt really out of control, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of control over how I felt. And that is scary and feels very terrifying.
So my story was about 10 years ago. I went through this period. It was almost a year of where I was going through like depression and obsession and things like that. I think it started with like a mild depression that I didn't feel good, and then I was trying to figure out what to do about it. So that turned into me kind of like trying to figure out ways to get myself out of it and figure out what the problem was. And that's, I think, where the obsession started. Like the obsession didn't start right away, it started later. But I was essentially obsessing over, I guess like my own age, which was, I look back now and I realize that, and I knew then it was super irrational, but I was worried about just how much time I had left to live. And I was 26 years old, and I was like, this should not be the way I'm feeling. And it's like I couldn't get myself out of it, so that's where the obsession started. I was basically trying to talk myself into the things I should have been feeling anyways, is that I'm young, I have my whole life ahead of me, I'd only been married for a year at that point, and I was trying to persuade myself or talk myself into the fact that I was being irrational and it wasn't working, so then I was more obsessed that it wasn't working, and then it just kind of was this like downward spiral. It culminated in me, I would lose like a good chunk of time of every day just trying to figure out like how to get out of this mess. I was like kind of in a black hole, and I was trying to figure out how to get out of it. So I would like space out. I remember one occasion I was trying this new recipe. My wife and I used to love to cook, and I was trying this recipe, and she went to go visit the next door neighbors for a few minutes, and I just spaced out the whole time, and I thought she was gone like 5 or 10 minutes, and then she came back and she was like, what have you been doing? And I was like, what do you mean? I've just been sitting here. She was like, I've been gone for like 45 minutes, and it was just, that was just lost time. I remember going into like Wikipedia and looking at people's age ranges and just trying to figure out like this person lived for this amount of time, or this person lived for this amount of time. It means I have this much time left, and it was just, it was not healthy at all. And it's like no matter what I did, I couldn't get out of it. I reached kind of the low point when I don't even know what I was doing. I don't know if I was trying to tie my shoes or something like that, and I felt like I couldn't lift my eyes from the ground. Like I couldn't stand up. I couldn't look up. I wasn't like looking at people's faces anymore when I was talking to them. So it turned into this kind of all-consuming thing that I couldn't get out of myself.
Well, I think as with anyone, you know, I have so many different things going on and pulling me in different directions, and we all have these things in life. Working full-time, becoming a mom to 2, right now, young kids, being a wife, being a friend, being just a daughter, a sister. There's so many different roles that I play, and at times it can be difficult to feel like I'm doing a great job in all of those different pieces. Obviously being a mom is the most important, but I want to be a good mom and show up for my kids, but I also too want to be happy and want to do things that fulfill me, like working and also seeing friends and, you know, being with my family. So to balance all of that at times can be a struggle. And as someone who's always been active, you know, I played sports in high school. I was always running and working out just because it was part of my training. So that has become a really big part of my life in terms of my stress relief. So I would say that at a young age I learned that, but I hadn't really fully grasped how important it was to take care of my body until I've become older and had more responsibilities and had more, I like to call it adulting, to do with regards to being a mom and you know, working at a school and a wife and all that stuff. So
So I was lucky enough to have a social worker that I worked with in middle school kind of reach out to me and kind of keep tabs on me, seeing how things were going, things like that. And so when things started to go south very quickly, he kind of extended that olive branch and said, hey, if you need anything, I'm still here. By all means, still work with me. And at the time I had a dean who is now the principal at Mattia. He helped me a lot, kind of took me under his wing and showed me kind of how to be a man. Not having that father figure in my life for my entire life, I didn't necessarily have that male role model that I could kind of attach to. And so having them there to kind of lead the way and show me exactly what a man is supposed to be like, it definitely put me in a good place. And them just being able to, I guess, go above and beyond what was expected of them to make sure that a struggling student could get out of the hole that he was digging himself in, made the entire difference in my life. It was definitely a combination of working with them as well as finding my own path, because I found myself hanging around the wrong group of friends because they were the ones that essentially were okay with the way that I was behaving. So unfortunately, as a teenager, when adults are mad at you, it doesn't really make that big of an impact. But when your friends start to get upset with the way that you're behaving and know that you are capable of doing much more than you're kind of giving out, that's where you start to see the positive change, because you want them to essentially stay around. And if your behavior will stop them from being around you, then that's where you start to kind of notice a change, and especially if it's for the better. Seeing and knowing that it's for the better was a huge thing for me. So between friends not being okay with my behavior and then my mentors kind of leading me down the right path, it all kind of just built up to make this awesome person that we call D'Angelo.
Well, something that I did is I decided to try to just fix my diet, and that doesn't mean going on a diet, that meant just eating healthier foods. And I just made sure that I ate enough food, because I realized that food has a big impact on your emotions and your emotional well-being. And so I decided to kick my anorexia in the face and just really try to eat as many meals as I could while being healthy. And then that made me I was finally able to then exercise again, which that made my mood uplift again. And I had to put myself in the mindset of, if people don't want to be around me, then I don't need them. And I just decided to only surround myself by good people and people that were positive. And I just had to tell myself, like, I'm worth it, and I don't need this negativity in my life. So just kind of switching things around and giving my mind something to focus on, like my exercise. And I also decided to do a lot of more relaxing activities, like doing art, and that really changed my whole mindset. Now I'm much better. I went through like 3 years that was just horrible, but I'm really happy that I did go and ask for help, because if I didn't ask my parents for help, I wouldn't be where I am today. Because after asking my parents for help, then they got me a counselor, and she's been helping me. And I've also had a lot of support at school from the counselors here. And it just feels so good to be able to know that I was able to get through it, because at a time I didn't think I could get through it. And it feels great to be like, I can get up and know that I can get through anything now.
So I told my parents first, just how severe it was, and they helped me get help. So they set me up with a psychiatrist, so I got on medication. They had me see a psychologist, a counselor at my school, so I went to go see her twice a week. And it actually took time to find a rapport with a counselor. I bounced around with a couple for a while until I found one that I felt was really helpful. but I did. And so I went to go see a counselor twice a week. I also started going on daily hikes and daily walks. So I got really into hiking in the outdoors, and that helped with anxiety a lot. And then one of the biggest things, like in addition to all that, is I started volunteering. I found that it was easier for me to connect with volunteer community because I had something to talk about. Whereas when I was trying to connect with my peers, I wasn't very happy, I wasn't in a good place, and it gave me anxiety to try and be peppy and make them like me, and I would just withdraw. So I found it helpful to have a mission, a focus, when I was working with other people. And so I volunteered at an animal shelter, and I volunteered tutoring at an elementary school, which is what made me want to go into education then. Ended up changing my career path. I spent more hours a week volunteering than I probably did studying, and it really got me through that time. I feel like I got more out of it. I felt like I had a sense of purpose, and it made me feel connected to the community. So really it was a combination of things that made me feel better, like medication, exercise, trying to not be isolated, get out, volunteer, and therapy. So it was a lot.
I would say about 80% would go to my social worker, Miss Little. I would not be who I am today without her help, and without her making me laugh at least once a week. I don't know where I'd be. Her, and then she actually introduced me to my therapist. So her and my therapist are two of the most helpful people I have around. We talked through a lot of things and we rationalized a lot of things. They told me about coping skills for the longest time, and I always thought they were really stupid. It's just stupid to me. I still have struggled thinking like, oh my gosh, I have to use a coping skill. But after a long time, they were right. They do work if you actually do it. I never really actually did them. So that's one way that that's the one thing that they've helped me acquire. That's a really good skill that everyone should have, but not a lot of people choose to use it.
Okay, yeah, so obviously at that point, like, my anxiety was not at bay, right? Like, it was literally debilitating. And so we talked about anxiety, and it's important to know, like, we all have anxiety. We all have it. We have anxiety for good reasons. We have anxiety for bad reasons. We learn to channel it in a healthy way. But when it's not a healthy way and it's debilitating to how you physically feel, that's an issue. And I had never experienced that feeling myself. I'd heard about it. I knew it was irrational, but I couldn't channel it. So I remember getting home that day that I was feeling off the entire day, and I'm like, I'll just sleep. I'm just gonna sleep, I'm gonna be fine. And I couldn't sleep. And then I called in sick. And then I called my doctor. So I call my doctor, and then I have an appointment for the next day. And I'm like, okay, I got this, I'll go to work. Go to work, I'm feeling okay. Get through like the first 3 periods, and then I was not okay. So I first went to Beth Packer. I went to her first. And I got to witness like the angel of a person that woman is. And she was able to explain to me what was happening to me. I had no clue what was happening to me. And the way she spoke to me and the lack of, the reservation of judgment was phenomenally healing in that moment. And she drove me home that day. That woman drove me home. So what a gift. What a gift we have. And so I go home, and then I go to the doctor, and I had a really long talk with that doctor, which is great. She's a good general practitioner, and we ran some tests, just physical tests, to make sure nothing physical was going on. Everything was coming back clean, but she really talked to me. She's like, how's your marriage? How are your kids? How are your children? What stresses you out? What's causing this? And when I started to list all the things, even some that I didn't share with you, that had happened within that time frame, she was like, of course, Mary. So she was the first one to kind of acknowledge like why, my body wasn't going to allow me to continue. My body was stopping my mind, and I wasn't doing anything to help my mind stay healthy. I had reached the point where, there was like no return. And that worry treadmill, I had to increase the pace on the worry treadmill, and I was going super fast, but I really didn't know how to jump off, because at that point, again, like, I wasn't my rational self. And so through a conversation with her, she recommended a counselor for me to go speak to on how to cope with my anxiety at that particular time. So I did go to this counselor a few sessions, and just within a few sessions, I felt better. She gave me actual practical little exercises that I could do, and she herself openly shared her issues with anxiety, the counselor, and different coping mechanisms that she used to go through that, and just got me to really talk, and not keep up the mask of I'm fine, because mostly I am fine, and it scared me. I was so scared during that time of my life, because like anybody that knows me, like, I find the funny. I'm the person that finds the silly. I like to make jokes all the time, and I wasn't doing that. And then I'm raising 2 little kids, right? And I don't want to show them that I'm not doing well, right? So every time I was feeling emotional, I would suppress it in front of them and like hide in my room and shut the door, So it was just a lot. And emotional stress is difficult, and our society isn't always great about giving people time to deal with their emotional stresses either. And so it's just made me more empathetic as a teacher, as a parent, everything, moving forward. But so I got the professional help, which helped me. I loved that counselor. By this 3rd session, I was feeling more me. And so beyond the help that she gave me, like, I helped myself. So I changed some routines in my daily life. I asked for help more, which I wasn't a big person to do that. I put quotes on my fridge to read that were inspiring. And I love music too, so I would listen to songs that inspire me all the time. And there was one song from this musical called Once, and I've heard it 100 times. And there's a line in the song where the singer says, I was driving home and listening to it, and he says, "You have warred enough with yourself. It's time that you won." And I'm like listening to that, and I'm like, yeah, man. I was like, I have been going through this really private war. And I have warred enough with myself, and that just, again, was another inspirational thing I just kind of needed to hear to keep me on that journey. And then, I don't know if you've ever experienced like a feeling of panic. It's a horrible feeling. And I also was like, I don't ever want to feel that again. So I made it my mission, like, to do much better for me moving forward, because I don't want to feel that ever again. So between the combination of just an awesome medical doctor to run things by, and then that wonderful counselor, and then me teaching me like how to take care of me, was the biggest part too.
I was very lucky that it was during the summertime, so I didn't have to come to work every day. I think my story would have been very different had I had to come in and be in front of students all day long. I could really veg out, take my time if I needed to be alone or cry. I had that opportunity. Coming to work every day is a totally different ballgame. I've used the counselors here, and I've gone and talked to them about my feelings, talking especially about, I'm having this feeling, is this a normal feeling, or is it something that I need to correct? And really, and doing my own reading about grief and moving through it, and then and looking at like my life in general and the choices I was making to help my body just feel better.
I struggled for a long time just with myself, I felt weak, I felt broken, I felt like no one would understand, like I thought I was the only person who'd ever gone through mental health issues. Even though I knew my dad had a history and both my brothers had a history, but that, to me, that wasn't me. It wasn't something that I was ever gonna deal with because I had a different personality than them. So I was very hard on myself for months. And I think more and more I pulled away from people. Like, people at work started to ask me if I was okay. Like, some of my good friends here were like, "Are you okay?" And I would always be like, "No, I'm fine." And they could tell I wasn't myself, but I wasn't going to admit it to them. I reached a breaking point right around, I went to my parents' house to do my taxes. My mom's an accountant, so she was doing our taxes, and I was upstairs in their office, and she was going to help me out. And I just was like, "Mom, I gotta ask you something." And I just kind of let it all spill out, and I was I was more vulnerable with her than I'd probably ever been with most people. Like, I mean, I was a wreck. I was sobbing. I was crying. She was trying to help me rationalize, and she even said, like, we're all gonna die. We all have a certain age. We're gonna go. And she was like, that doesn't bother me at all. And I was like, I know it shouldn't bother me, but it does. And so that's when she was like, I think you need help. So she talked me into calling our employee assistance program that we have here in District 204, and they hooked me up with a social worker. And I had one session with a social worker, and that she was like, you need to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist was like, you probably need to be on medicine. And every step of the way I remember feeling like, I don't want to do this, and I don't need this, and this isn't for me, and I can figure it out on my own. But every step of the way, people talked me into it in a way where I was like, okay, I probably need this. I remember the psychiatrist was basically trying to talk me into going on some medicine, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be on something. I don't want to be dependent on something, anything like that. And he was like, if you're in pain and you're going to need this to break the cycle. And he was like, you're not going to be on it forever, but we need to try that. And I was still refusing, so then he just says like, well, tell me how you feel. And I told him like the ups and downs I had, because I would have these moments where I was in a kind of a deep hole, and then moments where I felt almost normal, and then I thought I'd be getting better, but then I'd go back to a deep hole again. And he flipped out this chart. It was almost like, I tried to explain to him that it was almost like me being bipolar or manic depressive. I don't know what the correct term for it is anymore, but he showed me this chart where it was kind of the ups and downs, and there'd be this dip down and then back to a normal level and this dip down. And then once he showed me that chart, I was like, that is literally exactly how I feel. And I haven't been able to explain that to anyone. And so as soon as he showed me that, I just kind of started trusting him a little bit. After a few sessions with a social worker, I was trusting her a lot more, and then basically just taking their advice on how to work on myself.
And for the people that I know who have struggled with mental illnesses, I think the best option for them was to basically seek out for help. I know that the people that I know personally, they did seek out for help eventually, and it did change their lives forever. They went out to NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and they contacted people from there, as well as the suicide prevention line, as well as like other things similar to that. And I think it's so important for people who are struggling to come out without feeling ashamed or scared, because that's another part of being human, is we all have our own struggles and we're all dealing with things. And I don't think it's appropriate or it's totally unnecessary for people to judge others for what battles that they're fighting through themselves.
I would say that after I had my second child, my daughter, decided that I needed to make sure that I had time for myself during the day, and started off just, freaking out because there was no time for me to do that, because newborn babies are up at all times of the day, and in addition to that I had a 2-year-old and eventually started back at work. So finding that time and making it a habit to work out, to read something that would kind of inspire me, make me feel good, a devotional of some sort, I knew that that was important for my attitude and just my overall happiness, because again, I didn't want to walk around feeling stressed out, and that was starting to happen the more and more I picked up as I was kind of progressing forward. So I got into the habit of working out, and I started off doing it in the evenings, and I would work out for 30 minutes a day, about 5 days a week. And all of a sudden, my energy, my attitude, my presence when I was at home or when I was at work, when I was with my friends, everything started to increase a little bit. And I was shocked by that, because I felt like I was giving up more of my time, but by investing time in myself, it made me a better person for all of the other stuff that I had going on. So I would say my journey kind of started there with just a realization that, wow, by taking care of my body, this is something that really makes me feel good. So as I started to work out more, I saw just how important it was to start also fueling my body in the correct way. So paying attention to the different types of food I was eating, what time of day I was eating, and just making sure that I was not putting a lot of extra sugars into my body that made me just feel gross and sluggish, not only during my workouts, but during the day as well. And I would say that by doing all of these things, like I already said, it totally changed my attitude. But as the demands grew, because they do grow as kids get older, as my mom always says, bigger kids, bigger problems, demands at work, just a different role and different things, stress always does increase. And then obviously other things in life happen, everyone's life goes up and down. And that was something that I was constantly going back to kind of be my me time, to help me work through all the stuff that was going on in my mind. And so I make it a priority. And now, it's just part of my schedule. If I miss a workout in the morning, I make sure to get it done at night, because that's my time for me. And it's made a huge difference in just who I am and how I show up for all the people who rely on me to do various things.
I would say get involved with things that you like, not necessarily what people expect you to get involved with, but more so what you have a passion for. For me, it was sports, specifically football. There is nothing better than being an angry student and being able to hit someone and get away with it. So football was like the perfect sport, and it led me to like playing in college. It led me to being able to let out my aggression in an appropriate manner and still being able to maintain myself within the building, knowing that I have football to kind of go to at the end of the day. So it definitely kept me both active as well as kind of put together by being able to have that balance of both academic, you're supposed to be this way in school, and then that aggressive side that I could let out in a positive way. The first thing I would say is to admit it to yourself first, because if you're not able to admit it to yourself, you're definitely not going to be able to admit it to someone else that is trying to help you. So definitely coming to that conclusion by yourself and not necessarily having those outside inputs into it, that something just doesn't quite feel right. And then once you admit that to yourself, I would encourage them to go out and seek help. That could be from a friend, family member, trusted teacher, awesome social worker. It could be from anybody who they feel comfortable with talking with. And it doesn't necessarily mean that a solution is gonna take place right then and there, but it's the step in the right direction. And so if they can identify it within themselves and then seek that help, I feel like they're already on the right path. Kind of what I do now to kind of keep everything like calm and self-centered and things like that. I work out every single day, 4:15 a.m. to make sure that like I like cleanse myself of all the bad things. That's my time, that's my self-care, which is very important, that every person set aside something that they enjoy doing. And so for me, that's being active and working out and things like that. So every day before I come to work, every weekend, there's some sort of workout, whether it's running or going to the gym and lifting weights, punching a punching bag, whatever it is, there's some sort of workout for at least an hour, because I feel like you owe that to yourself to set aside that self-care time, just as you would set aside time for homework or work or school or athletics or whatever it may be. Make sure that that self-care time is important to you.
I would say to definitely speak up and tell someone, whether that's a friend or your parents or any kind of trusted adult. It doesn't have to be your parents. It could be your friend's mom, or it could be your aunt or someone else, or someone here at school. And I would just say to speak up and just be honest with yourself, that if you realize that you need help, get help as soon as possible, because the sooner that you get help, then the sooner that things can get better. And just to not get frustrated, even don't think that, okay, I got help, now it's gonna all suddenly turn around. It's work from everyone. It's from getting help, and you have to work towards it yourself. And most of all, you have to want to get better. If you don't want to get better, then you won't. And you have to have that will to get better.
Well, first, if you think someone is suffering from depression, anxiety, potential suicidal thoughts, just ask them. Be upfront. I always have the what if I had asked my brother, are you having suicidal thoughts? And a lot of people think, well, if I ask him, I'm going to plant the idea. And that's not it at all. Some people actually wish that you would ask. They want to confide in someone. They're in a lot of pain and they don't want to be in pain. So just asking and being very upfront about it. Just saying, are you thinking about killing yourself? Have you had suicidal thoughts? And then if they have, then trying to reach out to a professional and get them help. If you yourself are having depression, doesn't even have to be as severe as suicidal thoughts, but reaching out to someone that you trust. Like I went to my parents, other people might go to a friend, they might go to a teacher, just telling someone and realizing it's probably gonna be a lot of different things that are gonna make you feel better. It's not gonna be one solution. Like for me, it was, weekly therapy, it was medication, it was eating healthy, it was going for hikes, like daily exercise, it was volunteering. So realizing it's gonna be a lot of different things. It's gonna take a little while, but it will get better. I don't know if there was like one trigger that made me get help. I think it was just, I recognized that I was having suicidal thoughts and I didn't want to hurt my family more because I knew what had happened after my brother died. So I think it was the fact that I had had someone who had committed suicide that made me want to go seek help. But it wasn't necessarily one trigger. I do realize though that it was worse. My depression and anxiety got worse the more isolated that I was. So it was hard in the morning to get up. But if I chose to just sleep in, miss classes, it ended up being worse. So that's why when I volunteered, it made me get out of bed because I had a commitment to someone else. And it wasn't just to me. It was, I have to go tutor this 5-year-old. I don't want to miss that. So it made me get out of bed and it was hard, but it helped.
Don't give up. I mean, it was years of like just battling my own self, and it was really hard, and it is going to be really hard, but when you come out on top, it's going to be the most satisfying feeling that you'll ever feel. And maybe in the moment, it might not feel like anything will ever get better, and I know people told me this all the time, like, oh, it gets better, and I was like, okay, you don't have to keep saying that, like they're lying, but I promise it will get better if you just keep at it. And I look at a quote every morning on my phone. It says, I think you should keep going just to see what happens. And so I keep going just to see what's gonna happen in the end.
Well, I think just this is amazing. Share your story and don't, feel, I even tell my students this all the time, I tell my own children this, like, there's such power in leaning into your vulnerability. And if more people did that more often, then we'd feel more comfortable expressing our stories. And one of my biggest criticisms when I was going through what I was going through, and I started to share with even some of my closest friends and family, they started telling me stories about they went through something similar with anxiety or sadness or whatever. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me? So share it with trusted people, because again, those stories don't make us feel so isolated in our experiences. And when you feel isolated in your experience, you don't want to share. And then just to kind of encourage the Health.Moves.Minds aspect, I do run at least 3 times a week. So that was one of the changes I did make. I'm like, I need to take care of me, so that's spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Like I got to get back to funny Mary, and not constantly think like something, okay, what's the next bad thing that's going to happen? What's the next bad thing that's going to happen? So I made sure I did that. And then I started doing, so I'll run like between 2 miles to 6 miles. And I also changed my mind with my mindset about that, because before it's like, oh, I'm like running to lose weight, and I don't do that anymore. I do it just for mental, like just to kind of work out, get myself moving, and I tell myself, hey, activity is activity, activity is activity, just to do it. And then I did start doing yoga just for some meditative practice as well, because I'm an on-the-go person. I think it's good for me to settle myself. And I did hot yoga for a little bit, really wasn't for me. But then I found this YouTube yoga instructor. Her name is, so it's Yoga with Adrienne, and she's silly, she's funny. So I was like, oh, she's like, if I were teaching yoga. And she has great, like, she even has one for teachers. Like, she's like yoga for teachers, or yoga to reduce, insomnia, or yoga for back problems, or, so, and she's just fun in the way she does it. So just kind of integrating that is so important. Like, super tired, had a rehearsal the other night, right? Don't get home till later. And I'm like, I gotta get out for a run. So got the 2 miles in, just like get out there, 20 minutes, whatever, get back. And just get, and that does, you release those endorphins, you feel better. when you're doing that. And then you sleep better, typically, as well. So yeah, sharing your stories, finding what calms you down. Like music calms me down. I constantly am listening to something. When I'm grading papers, I'm listening to music. When I'm just cooking in the kitchen, I'm listening to music. And like when I'm holiday cooking, the girls are like, oh, it's gonna be a Frank Sinatra day again, But that helps me. That keeps me happy. So just maintaining that joy and knowing, life does get harder. And the more people that we love, and that was what was so hard for me during that time. It's like things were happening to me, but then things were happening to the people I fiercely love. And to not be able to help them or support them and then accept that, my dad wasn't going to be here for very long, and that I needed to make peace with any problems we had in the past and make sure that my mom was going to be okay during that time too, was a lot. Like, your parents are your pillars. I don't care how old you are. And when you see them falling, I don't care how old you are. That's a real difficult emotional pain that you don't ever get over. That you learn to live with, and then you focus on how, they're still alive in you, but that's a journey. That's everybody has their own journey and everybody grieves in their own sort of way, and again, finding what fits for you and keeping you healthy and keeping you balanced and allowing yourself the me time that you need, and then also being reflective of what's some of the drama that I'm also creating, so having that self-reflection is obviously crucial as well.
I think I am the happiest now I've ever been because I really am thoughtful every day with what I do with my body. So I exercise every single day, even if it's going for a 20-minute walk outside just to get fresh air. I try to eat very healthy. I'm not super stringent, but I don't feel as good after I've eaten a bunch of terrible foods. Alcohol is also a depressant, so there's high school kids shouldn't be drinking, but moderating those kinds of things that you're putting in your body. And then for me, sleep is so important. I get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every single day. And if I get less than that, I notice that my brain plays tricks on me. I get really agitated. I'm more likely to be anxious and nervous about things that I know I wouldn't be otherwise. So being thoughtful on every day of what I do to my body is so helpful, and it helps me move through the daily stressors of having a job, having kids, and volunteering. So one of my favorite lines from a song is from Frozen. And this is kind of silly, but I have seen this movie thousands of times because I have little kids. But it's from when the trolls are singing, and one of the lines is, people make bad choices when they're sad or scared or stressed. So throw a little love their way and you'll bring out their best. And I really like to think about that because I have students who maybe are agitated one day, or they make a bad choice, or I get a parent email that's a little aggressive, or maybe I'm aggressive with talking to a student. And I always have to think, okay, this isn't about me. This is about something else that's going on. And thinking about those interactions a little bit carefully, because you can control yourself, but you cannot control other people and fix their problems.
I think that for me, it was, now that I'm on the other side of it, I feel like I've been much more able to reach out to people and say, this is what I went through and this is what might help you. And my advice for most of that is you have to be self-aware, I think, but also self-forgiving. I had such a hard time because I was just merciless with myself. I felt awful. I was beating myself up. I just felt like a wretched human being. So I think the first thing is you just have to say, it's okay to feel like this. You have to forgive yourself. It's okay to feel like this. It's okay to need help. And I resisted help more than I think anyone in my family did, just because I didn't think it was my role. But as soon as I started talking to people about it and processing, and they would support me and say, you could try this and you could try this, and I started trying those things, it was like I regained control. Even though I was not in control, I regained a sense of control that there's solutions to these problems, and I can work on this. And it's going to take time, and I have to forgive myself for it. But I think my advice would just be to first of all, just admit that you need help, and that's okay. Don't be worried about the stigma that you need help, and move forward in a way where you are forgiving yourself, and you try to improve little things every single day. And it's one of those things, like the days might not be perfect, but you're still forgiving yourself, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. I think for me, like with my brothers and my dad's history too, I think the way it happened to me was I was stuck in this situation where I was self-destructive in a way where I was beating myself up, but I never turned to, like other people in my family, I didn't turn to alcohol, I didn't turn to drugs, I didn't turn to gambling, I didn't turn to anything like that. And I'm not saying it's because I made a better choice, it's just the way it went for me. But I think as soon as I started getting better, it might have been easier to do some of those things. To try to compensate for however I was feeling with these destructive behaviors, and I really tried to avoid that, and I still try to avoid that now. Like in my it's been 10 years, and I still don't do anything that I would consider as destructive. I'm like the most boring person ever. But I think a part of that is I'm trying to keep myself sane and healthy in a way where I can teach well, and I can raise my kids and be a good husband and be a good friend and all those kind of things. Yeah, I think I've always tried to take care of, at least since I've been teaching, or since I've been more of an adult, I would say, I've tried to take care of myself a little more. And that's one thing I learned from the social workers, is how not to go down that dark path. A lot of that is just controlling what you're going to do and your thoughts and things like that. Like if I'm on Wikipedia now and I glance at someone's age range of when they were living, I just move on right away. I don't even think about it. But the diet and exercise stuff, I've always tried to take care of myself with that kind of stuff. I've always tried to eat healthy, and I think that really helps too. I don't know. I had this thing in the back of my head that I could dive into eating unhealthy foods, or I could dive into more alcohol or drugs or things like that. But I always knew that I wanted to take care of myself, that those things weren't going to help. Exercising was helpful. The social worker, one of the things the social worker said was to, take care of yourself in the way where there's a self-love, but there's also like you have this responsibility to take care of your body. And so I tried to, I wouldn't say I did more of that, but it was something that it was kind of a confirmation for me that I needed to do a better job of that I need to take care of my body and my mind at the same time, and you can't take care of one without the other. And I don't know if people have control over this. It's something that I just kind of fell into, but the people here, it was probably the worst period of my life that I've ever had. And I've had smaller moments, like when my son was in the hospital, that was agonizing too, but this was like months on end. And I was coming to work every single day. And it got to the point that everybody here, like all the people in the social studies department, like they knew my story, and they, like I'd never felt judgment. I only felt love. The administration team here, a lot of them knew my story. So I think I was lucky, but for anyone that's going through things like that, if you could find, and I'm not saying it's easy, or it's not saying it's going to happen for everybody, but if you could find for yourself a place where you are supported and you are loved for who you are, and the people are helping you become who you want to become, even though you might be going through a rough patch, like that was very helpful for me, and I'm very grateful. But with kids too, I know it's hard. Like I was 26 years old. I've been working here for 4 years at that point. So, but if you know you have these issues, I think going forward, maybe you want to try to find a career or a position or a place of work where you know that people are going to treat you well, and they're going to love you for who you are, and they're going to support you when you have the need of that, because I think people here in Nikwa, they really helped me through that.
I know people who have suffered from depression and things like that, and I'm not going to say names, but I think that as a student here at Nikwa too, and just a regular teenage girl, I know a lot of people right now are sort of desensitizing these topics. So a lot of people are just using these terms, depression, oh, I want to kill myself, things like that, in a way that it's totally desensitized, and people are losing the actual meaning and value of those statements. And I think it's so important for people to really think about what they say, because they're like making these statements that are extremely sensitive to other people, and they don't know who it's affecting. And I think really people should better educate themselves. As a member of You Matter, I think our group strives to, like, our main goal is to help people educate themselves and be more open-minded towards other people's and ideas. And I think if we do that, then we'd probably, delete the stigma, just totally remove that thing away. So they've been through therapy, they've obviously talked to like counselors, trusted adults, and things like that I recommend for anybody who is going through these struggles. And I know they themselves have like taken time off, a lot of self-care, and so they just came out to be a whole new person. And I think it's so it's happy for me to see that they're doing much better now. I think, like, back to what I said initially, is that just step out and go talk to someone you trust, because no matter what, no one's going to judge you at the end of the day, because our world right now is receiving more information. We're becoming more aware of these topics, and we're becoming more, it's a common topic now. So people should help each other out, because that's what friends are for. And I think if someone is struggling, they should definitely not hesitate to go seek support. And I promise you that there will always be an open door for you.
I think that we live in a society where we're constantly worried about other people and how we're pleasing other people and how we need to show up for other people. And while it's important to be kind and to be a supporter and to be a good family member and a good friend, we also need to remember that in order to do all of these things, we need to take care of ourselves. And sometimes that does take something consistent daily where you're checking in, whether that's working out, whether that's doing a daily meditation, whether that is just going for a walk, whether it's doing some journaling, whether it's eating healthy food so that your body feels fueled for what's coming along that day. I just think that we need to take care of ourselves, because we have control of that and we can make that choice to do it. And a lot of times in the chaos that is life, because it is chaotic and we all have busy lives, it's very easy to forget the person who really is the most important, you.
Where can you turn for help if you are having struggles with your emotional health? You need to realize that you are not alone. There are many resources and ways to find the help you need. The place to start is by talking to someone.
Remember, the most important thing is you are not alone.